All right, recording in progress. All right, so we'll begin with some sitting. And for the record, this is February 21st, 2023. For those in the future, star date 2023. So sitting back, just getting comfortable. Mm. So let me just mute folks. So yeah, just wherever you are, there you are. And making yourself comfortable and sitting upright if possible. You can also recline if that's more reasonable for you. Those of us who have physical challenges sometimes need to just lie down to meditate. And just settling in, coming into stillness. You can close your eyes or just lower your gaze if you're more comfortable having your eyes a little bit open. And notice what happens when you close your eyes. There's an immediate shift in perception. Awareness tends to connect more with the body, with feelings. So just breathing, feeling the breath moving in the body. And having a sense of just relaxing, releasing any tension. Softening the belly. Relaxing the jaw. Releasing the shoulders. And we can develop a intuitive way of releasing tension so that it feels as if the body is just hanging on the skeleton. The flesh is soft and moving towards the earth. The spine holding the body upright. This is one of the elements of balance we seek in our practice. In this case, the balance between being alert and being relaxed. And like many aspects of the practice, this is a subtle connection we have to make. Takes some practice, takes some time to learn to create this balance. And then letting the attention gather around the breath. Feeling the breath either at the nostrils or the belly, either the touch of air coming in and out at the nostrils, or the movement rising and falling of the belly. And we can also just be aware of the whole breath. Whatever makes it easiest for you to just settle with that rhythmic movement, touch. So here we find another of the balancing aspects of meditation, to balance an effort to stay with the breath without striving or becoming tense, falling into kind of competition with ourselves. Or this effort to be with the breath is a gentle and kind effort, motivated not by perfectionism, but rather by interest and by trust in the process. Breathing in and breathing out. It's natural for the mind to wander when we try to hold the attention on a single aspect of experience like the breath. And so much of our work is just returning, starting again, noticing when the mind has wandered and gently coming back to the touch sensation of breath. Now, the balancing of effort is one of bringing kindness while not becoming passive or apathetic. We're being gentle with ourselves. It's a gentle effort, but it is effort. At times we may find a particular thought or theme in the mind which seems to take over. And then we get consumed in some worry or some memory. Sometimes we need to step back and just notice where that's coming from. And maybe just acknowledging that this is something disturbing or difficult. We don't invite such thinking into our minds, but sometimes it just infiltrates. So we just have to accept that. Not that we give up on being mindful of breath or being mindful of the present moment, but we bring an understanding that there's this concern, this upset. And so again, an attitude of kindness, acceptance, forgiveness for our imperfection as meditators. This will take us much further than any striving or judgmental approach. right. Welcome again. Nice to sit together. Yeah. So we're coming up on 3 years of this meeting, this gathering. Started on a Friday night in March 13th of 2020, and the first Tuesday then was March 17th, St. Patrick's Day, 2020. And at that time, we started to go through my book, One Breath at a Time, and kind of just used that as a jumping off point for discussion. Took us quite a while, took us a couple of years, I think. And then we've been on in my book, A Burning Desire. Kind of was during that sitting, I was thinking about my own self-obsession and narcissism, and I'm reminded by the fact that I'm going through my books, not somebody else's book. So there you are. But I know these books, and they have stuff in it that I like to share. So yeah, and we are, of course, primarily focused on recovery and the Dharma, but so much of the time that just sort of means the Dharma, because the Dharma is essentially so much about healing from grasping, from addictive, patterns, internal and external. Vimalasara, another Buddhist, sort of sober Buddhist, says that Buddhism was the first recovery program, the original one. I think that's an interesting take. So we've come to, and we started on this on Friday night, step 7. And step 7, for those who don't know or need a reminder, says, we humbly asked him to remove our shortcomings. So him with the capital H is God. And so, certainly just dealing with this step as it's written is one of the issues that, we have to do when we're kind of taking this Buddhist approach that's non-theistic. But the way I think of this step is that it's really the step that's about change, and therefore the question that comes up for me, and has come up for me, from the earliest times that I worked with this step, was how does this actually work? It's all very well to just say, ask God to remove your shortcomings and wait for something to happen, but of course that's not really gonna do much. And so something else I'll say, because I think today is going to be sort of a overview day. Oftentimes, if I'm doing like a day long on Buddhism and the 12 steps, or sometimes even a weekend, really when I get to step 6 and 7, that's kind of the climax of what I do. The things that follow, sometimes I stop there. Like, that's kind of, in a way, I feel like this is the critical point of the process, and the things that happen afterward, the amends, and then the meditation, and the sharing of recovery that happens in the following steps are certainly important and vital to the process. But this seems to be the point at which transformation is at least pointed to, and so that question is there for me, and it's certainly a question that I have with Buddhist practice as well. Like, how does this work? So I talked on Friday about the law of karma, and this quote that I often use, and first used in this book, where Ajahn Buddhadasa says that in order to change, we beseech the law of karma through our actions and not merely with words, so that it's not about praying or having some higher power remove our shortcomings, but that it's actually the law of karma, which is the power, which is certainly a higher power. It's kind of the law of karma, as Ruth Denison, famous German Buddhist teacher, used to say in her German lilting accent, the law of karma says you don't get away with nothing, darling, and that was, I heard her say it in person, and I heard a lot of people quote her. Jack Kornfield quotes that, you don't get away with nothing, darling. And, it's pretty simple, right? Like, as addicts, it's like, yeah, that pretty much sums up our experience. But you don't have to be an addict, of course, to like realize, like, oh, when I do stuff, there are repercussions. And so if I want things to go a certain way, I need to do things that, create a momentum that moves in that direction. It's pretty simple. So what I did in this book was I tried to kind of take apart what are the tasks and the sort of fields of practice in Buddhism. And this was, I sort of made this up, I have to say. It sort of came to me as I was writing the book. And so I sort of point to 4 different aspects of our practice that I call mindfulness / insight, calm concentration, love compassion, and contemplation. And today I would probably say contemplation and reflection. So mindfulness, I'll talk a little bit about these, just to touch on them, and then probably in the coming classes we'll kind of dive into each of them individually. I think that's very likely how this will unfold. We'll see. So mindfulness and insight, I put them together because they are specifically about looking at things and coming to understand things through looking at them. So we know what mindfulness is. Or, if you've been practicing, it's about being present, about seeing things clearly in a non-reactive way, a non-judgmental way, trying to really have a very objective awareness of what's happening. Like, as much as possible, we try to let go of our own filters, our interpretive filters of things, and just like see the pure experience. And then when we see that pure experience without so much of the interference of our typical biases and judgments, then we get sort of a new clarity that we call insight. We see how things work. And in the Satipatthana Sutta, the four foundations of mindfulness, for every topic that the Buddha brings up, he says, notice how it arises and how it ceases. So this is like a critical piece of mindfulness. So that's pointing to a couple of different things. First of all, it's when he says, how does this arise and how does it cease? So how does this feeling arise, or how does this thought arise? And how does it end? He's saying, look at the causal relationship, right? Notice how things happen and start to take responsibility. Don't just see it like, oh, it just happened. It's like, no, wait, how did that happen? So very often when people are struggling when they come to me and ask about, trying to avoid relapse, if they're struggling with relapse, one of the things I bring up is, well, start to notice what the triggers are. What happened right before the last time you relapsed? and maybe back a little bit further, right? What kind of was the buildup to that? So how did it arise? And then, of course, another good question is, how did you get out of that? And just see how that process works. It might be that you only can figure out how it happened. You might not be able to figure out how to get out of it, but if you can see how it happened and stop doing that, then you won't have to worry about getting out of it, because it won't happen. So this is one of the things the Buddha is talking about that we should see with mindfulness. So it's not just, oh, I'm sitting here, I'm breathing, I'm aware of breathing in and out, I'm mindful of my breath. Great. Hey, I'm doing the practice. That's it. No, it's more than that. It's like, okay, then you find yourself off in left field. It's like, oh, what happened? For those of you who are not, Americans, left field refers to a baseball where when we consider left field to be kind of getting lost. So trying to make my teaching be more universal here. So, how did I get there? Well, and then I have to kind of reverse engineer it, right? Like, what? I was sitting here, I was breathing. Oh, and then I thought of, I heard the dog, right? We have an Olive next door. I heard the dog, and that reminded me of my dog when I was growing up. And then that reminded me of blah, blah, blah. And then you're like, oh, that's how I got to left field, because I heard that sound and it triggered it, right? And how did I wind up drunk? Oh, well, my ex called me, and, like, next thing I knew, I was at the bar, whatever, you just sort of start to see the processes, right? So this is an aspect of mindfulness. Now, the other aspect that the Buddha is talking about when he says, oh, notice the arising and the ceasing, is notice how it keeps changing. So he's pointing to impermanence, right? A vital teaching in Buddhism, something we come back to over and over. And so as you're meditating, and you get stuck, or you think, oh God, why is it always like this? It's like, wait, oh, that's just a thought. It's not always like this. And notice that it keeps changing. And again, this is something, I talk about so much with you guys, and with people who are struggling with feelings, noticing how feelings change. Because when a really painful feeling comes up, there can be this overwhelm that happens. And when we can remember, oh, wait, this is unpleasant, but it's not going to live forever. It's not going to be here forever. Then I can hold it with a little bit more space around it. So that this is all part of mindfulness. It's not just, oh, I'm aware of my breath in and out. I have this bigger picture. And this is sometimes referred to as clear comprehension. So it's a sort of a partner of mindfulness. Sati and sampajana, I think is the Pali word for it. So, and Ajahn Sumedho talks about this a great deal. So this big picture is really what allows insight and wisdom to come. And so that's why I put together mindfulness and insight as kind of partners in this process. So then the second piece I have is calm and concentration. So, you've all been practicing meditation and trying to meditate, and so that what's really challenging, what's really difficult, is to sustain your attention. Any one of us can go, oh, I'm breathing in, I'm breathing out. We can be mindful of that for a moment, but can we sustain it, right? And this is another critical piece of the meditative process. For insight to develop, it really requires sustained awareness. Because if you're not sustaining the awareness, then you can't see the arising and the ceasing. Because, you see the arising and then your mind goes off and you lose it. You don't see the process. If there isn't some concentration or sustained attention, you can't see the impermanence because you're not able to observe that process of change. You can't see the cause and effect relationship because you're not able to be with it long enough. Now, for most of us, I would say what's really appealing about calm and concentration is that it feels really good, and when you go on retreat, and I know many of you have been on retreats and done some sustained practice, you get to a place where it's like, this is so sweet, this is so rich, I just want to be like this all the time, or why can't I keep this going? And this is great. And so it's easy to get a little diverted about the purpose of concentration. I speak definitely from experience with this, that that pleasant feeling, it's so precious. I mean, and it's not something we should, it's like a double negative coming here. So let me see if I can put it in the positive. It's fine to pursue that. It's just that we should know and understand that that's not the really transformative aspect of concentration, the pleasantness of it. That has a healing quality, which again, I think for addicts and people in recovery and people who have experienced trauma and, mood disorders, like all the things that we share here, it's really valuable because it's really great to have something you can do that actually really just soothes you, that you can do for yourself. You don't have to get it from someone else. You don't have to take a pill. You don't have to eat something. You're able to sit down and soothe yourself. And of course, this connects to the third thing, that loving kindness too. But concentration itself has a soothing quality. Bhikkhu Bodhi says it cools the emotions. And that's a really interesting thing to notice, right? If you're having a tough time and you sit down to meditate, notice how things just, even if you don't get through to the other side of oh, I'm all better now, but just seeing okay, things kind of chill. And it's basically what people mean when someone is upset and they say, take a breath. They're just calm, cool yourself, right? And when we can sustain our attention, then there's a cooling that happens. And we're stepping out of, the five hindrances, the desire and aversion and all the agitations. We're stepping out of all that. And so naturally, we're just moving into this more pleasant place. It's not so much something we get to. It's more something that we remove the obstructions to it. So as we calm, it's not that we're I'm getting calm. What's really happening is that the agitating qualities are falling away. And then what we find is the natural mind state, which is calm, peaceful, compassionate. So we can see how mindfulness and concentration really are partners in this process. They're not fully, they don't reach their maturity without separately. Mindfulness can't penetrate deeply without concentration. And concentration without mindfulness is just a state, just a pleasant state. And indeed, there are ways that people get concentrated, athletes, computer programmers, all kinds of people get very concentrated, but they do it without mindfulness. And so no insight comes from that, at least in theory. It's possible. People can develop insight without intentionally being mindful. But when we have this intention to bring together mindfulness and concentration, it has a particularly transformative effect that separately doesn't have. And of course, we can spend, each of these topics, as I say, and maybe we'll see coming days, can be its own area for exploration. But I do sort of want to go through all four of these today. So the third piece I point to is love and compassion, or loving kindness and compassion. So this is the quality of caring for ourselves, caring for others, kindness to ourselves, kindness to others, concern for the suffering of the world, concern for our own suffering. And when you practice insight meditation, which is founded in mindfulness, one complaint, sort of historically, excuse me, is that it can become very dry. And this really, we see this particularly in like some of the noting practices, the body sweeping practices that are just really focused on mindfulness and concentration, and just stick with it and, just do it. I will say that in my experience, I have a sense that it's more of like a Burmese, and I know some of you are familiar with these distinctions, the Burmese approach to Vipassana versus the Thai approach, but any one of us can fall into this, this kind of, because behind it, there's a kind of striving. It's like I'm being mindful and I'm being concentrated, but I'm doing it with a purpose, and I'm going to get there, and we're going to make this happen, and there isn't a lot of joy in that. There isn't a lot of caring or kindness in it. And particularly then towards ourselves. So we can find ourselves kind of beating ourselves up in our meditation. It's like, well, I'm doing it right, aren't I? No, I'm doing it wrong. I've got to do it harder, and sort of getting into this almost, striving, sort of competitive, who are we competing with? I mean, I've been in situations, and I hope that I think some of you are a little obsessive about meditation like me, where you're in retreat and you're like, I'm going to be the last one to leave the meditation hall at night. I'm going to make sure nobody, I'm going to stay here until everybody else is gone. I'm going to prove that I'm the best meditator on this retreat. It's like, oh yeah, how's that working for you? You're conked out. No, I'm still here. I'm not asleep. So this is where, certainly for our individual and personal practice, so important to bring in kindness. And I hear how people like Jack Kornfield now refer to loving awareness. He doesn't even say awareness or mindfulness. He says loving awareness. So it's a partnership again. These are all working together. They're not sort of separate paths. They can be, certainly at certain times, we will emphasize one or another. We will work more on one or another. And this is part of our practice, is to sort of ask ourselves, what needs reinforcement right now? Do I need more concentration? Do I need more kindness? Do I need more mindfulness, more investigation? This is part of that whole process. But the beauty too of compassion, particularly, I think, is that it's something that, besides intentionally bringing it into our practice, it's something that also flowers out of insight. Compassion for all beings arises really when we see suffering within ourselves and we realize that our own experience is not unique, it is not separate. And we realize, oh, I'm just having this human experience. And there is a sensitivity, that develops with mindfulness and concentration. As things settle, there's kind of we're letting down some of the protective barriers we keep, to keep away suffering, and it's normal and a lot of the time probably healthy to have those barriers in ourselves, to be, not, we can't let in every ounce of suffering in the world 24 hours a day, or we'll just be burned out. I mean, maybe we can if we're fully enlightened. I'll tell you when I get fully enlightened if we can, But in general, we have to have some protection, some boundaries about how much we take in. But as we practice mindfulness and concentration, those boundaries naturally kind of subside, or they recede. And you feel this again on retreats. You tend to feel this, how you're kind of opening up, and you're in a safe container on a retreat. You're not reading the news. You're not getting, phone calls from people, and, you're just in a safe place where you're just with your inner experience, and the energy is around you in that container. And so you let down these boundaries, and then, as I say, they kind of recede. And in that space, it's like we start to tune into the suffering of all beings. It's like we hear the voices, and it can be very, very intense. I mean, it's not unusual. In fact, I would say it's unusual to go on an extended retreat and not cry at some point, because you just kind of tap into something, and it might not be anything you're even thinking about. You're just feeling it. But this is the element of insight that we see. Oh, there is so much suffering in the world, and even those who are causing suffering, they too are suffering, right? One of the great insights, Thich Nhat Hanh points to this so wisely, that when people are acting out of hatred, that hatred itself is painful. And that if we are sort of asked to actually have compassion, even for the victimizers, which is a tough ask, but we can touch into that at least. And that's insight, right? Insight. So then we see that insight and compassion and concentration all blend together. They are all part of this process as one thing. And I will say, I think for many of us, maybe the most important aspect of compassion is compassion towards ourselves, and being able to see our own suffering, and to see it as worthy of care, worthy of loving awareness, of kindness towards ourselves, that we too, just like all beings, deserve love. That can be a tough one to take in, but vital, I think. If we're going to be on this path of awareness, we're going to feel a lot. Right? We're going to feel more than the average bear, as they say. Also a cultural reference. And so if we're going to feel more, we're going to also need to care more. We're going to need to care more for ourselves, and take more care of ourselves, and to learn to do that. Again, vital in my mind. So the fourth piece of this sort of puzzle that I'm putting together of the practices that bring about transformation is contemplation and reflection. Contemplation, I learned this year. I'm a continuing student. Uh, Actually, in Buddhist terms, actually means to observe closely. So it's actually a kind of mindfulness, an aspect of mindfulness. But when I'm talking about it, I'm talking more about reflection then, which is the, intentional thought, right? Not just meditating and trying to quiet the mind and letting insights arise through that process, but stepping back at times and, probably not necessarily in even a formal meditation practice, but thinking about, but thinking intentionally about these questions about impermanence, about suffering, about compassion, about not self, thinking about mindfulness, thinking about, uh, all these aspects of practice, like the Eightfold Path, intention, right view, reflecting on all this, so that they become more complete ideas in our mind. I know with my own practice for years, I didn't. It wasn't until I started to teach really that I started to be able to like put together a lot of things about the Dharma. It's one reason why teaching is so valuable, and there's quite a few people here who have at least studied or worked at teaching. So you know what I'm talking about is when you have to give a talk about the five hindrances or a talk about right intention, then all of a sudden you're like, well, what is that exactly? And then you start to reflect in broader and deeper ways. But of course, you don't need to be a teacher to do that. It's more a matter of making the Dharma what we call taking refuge in the Dharma, so that you really try to, in all circumstances, that you kind of try to reference, oh, how would you see this through the Dharma lens, rather than, oh, I'm having this experience and it's about me and it's those people and me and we're having this whatever disagreement. And it's like, oh, how would I see this through the Dharma? Oh, that's anger, that's resentment, that's causing suffering. Okay. And it's really shifting perspective and trying to bring that reflective, contemplative attitude. It's like with impermanence. It's something that I think of a great deal. So when I feel the pain in my knee that comes up from time to time, there's both, oh, I don't like that. What's going on with my knee? And there's also, oh, aging. Oh, everything is impermanent. Oh, and so holding all of that, keeping that perspective, I think is so important. So this gives us sort of an outline, I think, maybe of what we'll get into more in the coming days, because I'd like to go through the four foundations of mindfulness and then go into each of these topics more extensively. So that'll probably take us a few weeks, given how things move at a glacial pace in this class. So there's just a few minutes left to the technical length of this class. So if anybody needs to leave, I understand. I will hang out a little bit if there are any questions or comments from another cultural reference, the peanut gallery. We'll have to start putting links into what Kevin's referring to. The peanut gallery was something that was in a 1950s children's TV show called Howdy Doody, a clown who, I think that's where the peanut gallery comes from. So any questions, any comments? And yeah, actually, you guys are not a peanut gallery. You're really way more advanced than a peanut gallery. So I take that back. That's kind of insulting.
Hey,
Yeah.
Kevin. Oh, I'll be quick. I'll be part of the peanut gallery.
Okay.
but so are you saying these four aspects are like foundational to kind of your Buddhist practice, or I was trying to capture the context to that.
Right. Well, yes. And more broadly, I think of when I have this question, I'm trying to answer the question, how do you change? How does change happen? And through a Buddhist practice and a process using Buddhist tools, how does it happen? And so then I'm saying, okay, here are these four elements of practice that work together to bring about change. Does that answer the question?
Yeah, thanks. I was just trying to get the
No, it's a good
kind of where
question.
you
I
were going with
appreciate it,
that.
Mike. Yeah. What to put the bigger context of what this is about. Yeah, it's about how does this practice work to bring about change? Yeah. Was that you, Vicky, speaking?
Yeah, it was.
Uh-huh.
Yes. So, when you were talking about calm and concentration,
Mm-hmm.
I'm trying to write about refuge.
Uh-huh.
And so I'm just kind of brainstorming, like, what is this? I know the triple gem and, the kind of conventional way of thinking about it. But, when you were saying there's this pleasant, these pleasant effects
Right.
of calm and concentration for sure, but that's not the point.
Right.
Okay, now, so it seems like refuge is in there someplace.
Mm-hmm.
Like the point is way bigger. There's this bodhisattva heart and this,
Mm-hmm.
development in this sort of huge way, right? That that's the call.
Mm-hmm.
The refuge, that safety,
Mm-hmm. Right.
that kind of like, well, I think of my first line in my metta practice is, may I be safe and protected from inner and outer harm, and that is a kind of bottom line for developing. And anyway, I don't know how to put this together, but can you?
Me, I'll say something. So, first of all, I think we can say, I think you're pointing to something anyway, which is that when you get concentrated, it is a kind of refuge from the madness of the world, like the mind becoming peaceful internally. That's a kind of refuge. It's not the bigger point of taking refuge in the Dharma, but it is a refuge. It's a protective place, just as I was talking about how it's healing and it cools the emotions. So it definitely, I think of it very much as a refuge. And we come to meditation for this, right? As a refuge. So there is that very practical way that we live and are drawn into the meditative refuge. Now, the refuge in the Dharma means something more than that. I connected to the third step, turning your will and your life over to the care of the Dharma. So trying to live in harmony with the Dharma, trying to see your experience through the lens of the Dharma. So that's like remembering, that's my knee pain and that's impermanence. So that's like the two, the relative and the absolute kind of. So it's got this big picture, but it also definitely has this moment to moment place in our lives where it's like, right now I need to just calm, or right now I need to remember that everything is impermanence, or that person who's acting like a jerk is actually suffering, so I should bring compassion to them. So that's to me, a lot of it's like that reminder to see my experience as in the context of the Dharma, not as personal. So it's definitely, again, like this difference between self and not self. Like I have my Kevin experience, and then I have this experience which is larger than that, which is seeing the greater, the dharmic view of it.
Thank you. Great.
Okay. Thank you. Anyone else want to chime in before we go? I know I'm going to see some of you this afternoon when we start the Living Kindness course. Anything I need to share here? I don't think so. Thank you, Monica, for putting all the information into the chat about Donna and about our we have that we have to do something with all those quotes we've got now, don't we? Okay. And we have a Google sheet where people share their contact information, and there are some people in there who specifically are offering to support newer people in recovery. So if you are newer in recovery and looking for some support from somebody with more experience in the Dharma and in recovery, get on there. You have to kind of scroll through the chat to find all this. It's nice that you're putting in all these other things, Monica, but maybe we should dial back on all my books and podcasts and things. But yeah.
Oh, it's and Angela put that in.
All right, we'll have to revise that because it gets a little overwhelming.
Okay.
All Kevin all the time, All right, folks. Very nice to see you all. I'll be back on Friday, and take care of yourselves, take care of your bodies, your hearts, your minds.
And for an abstinent lunch, we'll see you this afternoon.
Yes, stick with that abstinence, and continue to practice.
We'll have to do something. I realized the other day about all the quotes. I have to start
I know.
Putting them together for you. So
Well, as usual, I get motivated to do something like social media, and then I
saw that you put some of it up, that I had created for you.
Yeah. Well, maybe
another conversation for another.
Yes, maybe you and I and Angela can get together and do another session.
Come up with a way to make it
all right.
easier. Thanks.
Take care all.
See you later.
Thanks,
Bye-bye.